Mystoria sure went from should I trust these people too well, this pretty dang fast. Hey friends, welcome to Camino Rhapsody, which I'm sure all of you can already translate in your head what it means in English. This is a Eushully title that, to my surprise, got an English fan translation as of this week actually. Came to my attention absolutely out of nowhere. However, I've played a couple of Eushully games before, Himegari, Kamidori, and Sokoku no Aterio, which I've done an introduction video on already. So I was pretty down to tackle another one since it's been about a year since I've played one. The core gameplay this time around for Camino Rhapsody is pretty good in my opinion, although it does have some weak points, which I will tackle. As for the story and characters, while I like the side cast, both of these suffer from a main problem that can be summed up as pacing issues, which I will get into. As a heads up, I'll be using the terms used in the translation as opposed to the Japanese ones. And since this game does have 18+ elements, if you are bothered by that sort of thing, that's what the control button is for. Normally, I like to talk a bit about a background to a game, whether it be a series or a company. However, I feel as if I've already done it with Sokoku no Aterio, so I'll keep it short. Eushully is a doujin group that specializes in making STG and RPG eroges with visual novel elements. They are definitely one of the more well-known doujin groups, which started out in 1999 with Ikusa Megami. Outside of the Ikusa Megami franchise, most of them are not really connected aside from being in the same universe. However, plenty of characters make playable cameo appearances between games, so when you see them again, it's always a fun time. Getting back to Camino Rhapsody, whenever I talk about a game, I always like to start with the basic premise. One, because I think story is always an important part of the game, but two, it feels like the best way to get everyone on the same page in case people are coming in without knowing about it already. Camino Rhapsody follows the main characters El Ballad, La Villiere, and Mystoria, as they are three of many candidates seeking to become the next Divine Enforcer, or Kami no Kaido, a mythical being who resides and leads the Shrine of the End, a holy land which is situated in an incredibly vital place between many different countries. The Divine Enforcer is seeking a successor, and has started a test between the candidates to see who will succeed his will, with the candidates coming from all different races, gods, beliefs, and countries. Unlike the other candidates, El Ballad is there without passing any sort of test because of a special exception the Divine Enforcer made just for him. Before I get into anything, let me just say that I actually enjoyed playing this one, and I do recommend it as long as you know what you're getting into. I say this up front because I'm gonna start bagging on the biggest problem of the game right away. As I mentioned in the beginning, the entire pacing of the story is an absolute dumpster fire, to the point where I have to wonder if it was intentional with how bad it is, because I laughed real hard. So without getting into spoilers, the best way I can put it is that huge chunks of the story are just missing, and there isn't enough setup for nearly anything in the game, so everything feels really rushed. The game is 10 chapters long, and it feels like 90% of the story is shoehorned into the last 2 chapters. Plenty of events, key important revelations, relationships, and so forth happen with absolutely zero build-up. Every character is inexplicably drawn to the protagonist El Ballad to an almost comedic degree. They go from thinking El Ballad is a dirty cheater who got into the competition unfairly to wow, he must be super special for everyone to be following him. I guess I will too, in a matter of like one battle. Nearly all of the female cast members go from meeting him for the first time to just being straight in love with him in a matter of 1 or 2 conversations. Some of them even on the first meeting as well. Even the main heroine, Mystoria, she moves from meeting El Ballad for the first time to wanting to fight to the death with the other main heroine, La Villiere, for El Ballad's love so quickly that I wondered if I had missed something when I got to that point, because that point was less than 7 hours in. Speaking of which, I found it really strange that the game forces you to select between which of the 2 main heroines El Ballad chooses as his lover during chapter 4, since he makes a huge deal out of staying loyal to only one of them. Moving aside the fact that throughout the game he bones the entire female cast, which is like 15 other women, this choice seems entirely ridiculous, especially when you realize that the game for all intents and purposes really only has one route. You would imagine that making a choice like this would change the story in some fashion, but it really doesn't. The entire game is exactly the same, except you don't see the 5 H scenes with the heroine you didn't select. Aside from that, it only changes about one scene for the final chapter, and one 10-second epilogue scene. Nothing else really changes, the three still hang out together as the core team, they meet all the new companions together, all the battles are the same, the final battle is the same, so what's the point of making this choice? What's stranger is that, even though I call these two the main heroines, since the game makes them out to be important, they are the only ones on the title screen, the centerpiece of the box art, and El Ballad himself makes a big deal out of it, they still get the same, maybe even less development than everyone else, because if there's one thing Kamino Rhapsody does well, it's giving the entire cast a solid amount of character interaction, probably to the detriment of the main story. Nearly every single cast member aside from the main heroine gets many interaction scenes dedicated purely for them, just in developing them as characters, probably about 4 to 6 scenes for every single character, not including H scenes, and they're all decently long too. Now the reason why I say to the detriment of the main story is because, excluding El Ballad, the main heroines, and the tree, there are about 19 characters, so that's a lot of scenes purely for character interaction. Pretty much 95% of each of the first 8 chapters is dedicated towards El Ballad meeting new people, then joining the party and learning about them, with the remaining 5% having anything to do with the main plot. As for specific examples of events, I'll get into that in the spoiler section at the end if you want to check that out. Now let's talk about the characters themselves. While I don't like how everyone instantly becomes enamored with El Ballad for very little reason, I personally like El Ballad himself. I appreciate him being a nice guy to the point of absurdity, how he always tries to look at both sides of the argument, how he's always doing his best to help people and so on. You can't really hate a guy like that. Some people might think he's as plain as vanilla ice cream, but I'm fine with it. I will say though, if he was actually such an amazingly charismatic man, then I probably could have accepted everyone just falling head over heels for him. As for the two main heroines, my problem with them is that, well, first of all of you already know my opinion on tsunderes, not really the biggest fan of them, and well, the two main heroines, La Villiers and Mystoria, are basically that. I suppose that's not entirely true, Mystoria is kind of a kudere, but that's basically a more slightly extreme tsundere. Which brings up another point. The two main heroes are way too similar to each other, not just in personality, but also they look the same too. When you have a cast composed of so many fantastical races, why is the choice for the main heroine role only 2 very similar humans? Not that it matters, I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, most of the characters get more development than the main ones anyways, and I really did enjoy the whole dynamic of everyone one by one joining the ensemble performance by the 3 main characters. Now, as for the side cast, I liked them. As I mentioned earlier, Kamino Rhapsody dedicates plenty of time to really get to know every single one of them. Gulandio acts as the big bro kind of character, and it was nice to see him give advice to El Ballad even during the beginning, before the main character gets a whole army following him. Clarissa is another favorite of mine, as one-note, battle-crazy berserker as she is, I enjoyed the conversation scenes with her, and her friendship with the bear, Alagrand, and Gulandio. Zelgane is radiating so much main character energy that was fun to watch him. His bandana, the giant sword. Nekoru is cute, and she feels like one of the few characters who actually gets an appropriate amount of development before she tries to bone him. Tsumugi feels like she has more relevance to the plot than even the main heroines. Rito's backstory as a world-traveling Majin is interesting enough that I wish they delved more into it. Honestly, if I had a choice between all the female characters to choose as the main heroine, Mystoria and La Villiers would be somewhere in the lower end for me. Time to get into the meat and potatoes of Kamino Rhapsody, and what you'll be spending most of the time doing, the gameplay. Kamino Rhapsody is a hex-based tactics RPG. In order to advance the plot, you go through individual levels which take place on hex tiles. Every main stage in the game begins with El Ballad, Mystoria, and La Villiers on the field already, with optional stages usually only having El Ballad from the start. Additional units can be put into the field from the roster, so long as you've demanded to do so, which you get from collecting off the ground, or killing enemies then collecting off the ground. It is a turn-based tactics game, so on your turn you move all your units, do your actions, then it switches over to the enemy's turn, and so on. Pretty basic stuff all around. The game does a fantastic job doing the tutorial explaining it, if you decide to play. I actually rather like some of the more unique features of the gameplay, for instance God Medals. You collect them during stages and sometimes when you level up, and they provide plenty of ways to customize your characters. These medals range from unique attacks to basic passives like increasing attack or movement to shields, and you can only put as many God medals as you can fit on your character screen and with respect to their cost, which is based on their level. Speaking of which, Kamino Rhapsody has a unique level system different from a traditional RPG, where at the end of a stage, all characters in your roster get stat runes, which can be put onto character-specific graphs to increase their stats and their levels if you form bingo lines. I rather like this idea since you aren't forced to make certain characters get last hits, since everyone gets the same amount of EXP at the end of a stage anyways. This also allows you to use anyone on your roster without worrying about characters falling behind. Of course it isn't perfect. One problem, for instance, is how only characters in your roster get the stat runes. So if you happen to play through the optional missions, it can feel as if later characters don't get as many stat boosts to work with. They try to balance it out with later characters having higher stats and costs, depending on when you get them. Every mission is also filled with side objectives, which when you complete, you get additional god medals, with completing every side mission in an area giving you plus 5 points to all characters, including future ones, which you can distribute at will to increase certain stats. Luckily, you don't really need any of these additional stats to win the game, which is a good thing because some of these side missions are ridiculous. Missions like beating all enemies within a few turns is cool, it forces players to try a different playstyle. Stuff like breaking every single wooden fence in a stage is not. I played through Kamino Rhapsody on normal, and I went through half the game only running the main missions, and the difficulty felt decent. It wasn't so hard that I spent hours on each stage, but it wasn't so easy that I could just blind run it down to victory. Also, unless you decide to turn this option off in the beginning, you're allowed to save during battle for those who want an easier time. Later, I tried spending a couple of hours clearing every optional mission and side objective, and I will say it isn't a lot of fun. You don't miss story elements by skipping them, and every main stage is perfectly beatable without the extra stats. My suggestion is just go through the main story, and if you ever feel stuck by a stage, then go ahead and do some optional ones to try to get a few extra stats. Kamino Rhapsody having this sort of flexible difficulty, I do rather appreciate. It allows players of all skill levels to figure out how hard they want their game to be. Finally, I suppose the last point I want to tackle before the spoiler section would be the fan translation itself. Before I jump into it, let me say I've talked about this before when talking about translations in Japanese games. No translation can ever be perfect, because there are always different ways one can translate Japanese to English based on intent, tone, and so forth. There are, however, good and bad translations, and what I can point out is when there are glaring issues, inconsistencies, or basic errors. As this is a fan translation, I'm coming in not expecting the highest level of polish. Overall, the translation is solid enough that you will get the story and what everyone is saying in nearly every scene. With that said, there are plenty of basic spelling errors scattered throughout the translation, with the biggest culprit being words missing a letter here and there, like leaning is fun. I would highlight more examples, but they're kind of everywhere. Some in area descriptions, some when people are talking about an area, some in H scenes, some during the main dialogue. Again, it doesn't make the translation unplayable, it just shows that, oh, this is a fan translation. Straight up mistranslations are a thing too, like it says right here, kill 9 demon foxes, when they're referring to the giant demons. There are also places where sentences are just structured awkwardly. Could be for a multitude of reasons, maybe someone quickly translated it and didn't go back to make it read more naturally. Maybe one of the proofreaders or translator has English as a second language, and that's why a sentence here or there might be a little stiff. Some of the characters also get the thou art treatment in order to convey the idea of a more formal language, which is definitely a valid way of doing things. However, sometimes it's used a little liberally. Finally, not a fan of the text font they chose. Like, what's this Comic Sans for Shrine of the End? Some of the font here on this screen just makes it look like a bad Android port, but again, whatever. Majority of the script is written perfectly fine, so all these errors don't really ruin what is a decent translation. And that's pretty much my look at Kamino Rhapsody, without any spoilers of course. I will get into those in a bit, however, I like to give my closing thoughts beforehand, especially because I think that Kamino Rhapsody is a decent game in the end. I enjoyed my time playing it. I will say when I got into the later chapters, I understood a bit more why this game isn't as beloved as some of Eushully's other entries. With that said, the core gameplay is pretty fun, and I did appreciate how much time was dedicated to every single one of the members of the cast, where in a game which has 23 playable characters during the main story, is no small feat. If only there was more setup for everything in the game, and the entire ending didn't feel like it was rushed at the last second, this would have been a really good entry as opposed to just being a decent one. Regardless, I had an enjoyable time, and if everything I just said about Kamino Rhapsody sounds appealing to you at all, I'd say give it a shot. If you want to talk with me about the game, The comment section is down there as always, as well as a like button if you enjoyed watching. I tend to cover Japanese games, whether they be PC, console, visual novels, doujin, JRPG, and so on. So if any of that appeals to you and you want to support me, the subscribe button is there as always, notification and all buttons as well if you want to stay up to date on when my next video comes out, usually Saturdays and whenever else. Finally, I have a Twitter at ZeronVN where I talk about the games I'm playing, and sometimes I ask for suggestions on what to cover next. Okay, enough of that. We're gonna get into the spoiler section now, so if you are interested in playing the game, now is your chance to leave. I'm gonna put the warning signal on, and afterwards I assume everyone is ready. Earlier, I said that events, relationships, and plot happens without any sort of setup. With regards to character relations, moving aside the ones that are just completely smitten with him upon first contact, even the more antagonistic competitors spend like one event just trashing the main character, calling his approach naive, but then suddenly after one mission of seeing him in action, they just change their tune completely. Mystoria's love for El Ballad is the same thing, where they meet for the first time, and after playing music together one time in the beginning, she's already mysteriously interested in him and going against the whole cold-hearted persona she already has. It makes sense for Lavilliere to be in love with El Ballad, since she's a childhood friend and has been with him for a long time already. Mystoria, on the other hand, sure, I think there's enough scenes for her to start taking interest in him, but to suddenly engage in this comedy routine of two women fighting over one guy, as she puts precedence on this over the goal of becoming a divine enforcer, I don't know about that one. But this is all small potatoes compared to the main plot itself, and the reason why the main plot suffers from feeling exceedingly rushed with absolutely no setup is because it doesn't really exist until the last two chapters. The story is a competition between hundreds of different candidates to become the new divine enforcer, and this competition involves all the candidates taking trials. The thing is, these trials have no real plot relevance to anything. Most of them are just straight battles, and any one that isn't just a battle, the only event that happens is a character joining El Ballad's party due to his mystery charm. The only hint of an underlying plot comes in the form of two joke characters, Hao and Rid, who basically act like Jesse and James from Team Rocket in the sense they pop in, act like idiots, mention their evil organization by name, and then easily get chased away. Aside from that, during two of the missions, there is a mention of a seal by the Divine Enforcer that holds the evil god at bay, and at the end of one of these missions, the big bad General Pause shows up one time and tries to convince El Ballad and Tsugumi that he's actually on the good side, even though he looks like the craziest evil villain you've ever seen in your entire life. Sure, the angels appeared to wage war against the Divine Enforcer and the Shrine of the End during one chapter, but they completely vanished from the story after a single battle. Brahoka gets two whole chapters to himself, but he does nothing important, but failed to murder the MC twice. But that's it, and by the time we reach chapter 9 and we're 30 hours into the game, nothing of note has really happened. Suddenly, we're at the end of the competition already, where there are only 3 candidates left: El Ballad, Zelgane, and Shardio. Everyone following the main character who are supposed to be rivals, they just say that, oh, we don't care about it, you can be the one to become the Divine Enforcer. What's funny is that while Zelgane has been set up to be the final rival, everyone comments on his strength and you see his massive stats during that one angel battle, Shardio, on the other hand, appears out of absolutely nowhere. He has one scene early in the game where he talks to the Divine Enforcer, one scene where El Ballad calls him Library Senior, and that's it. For the next 7 to 8 chapters, there's nearly no mention of him for any of it. And then suddenly, he's one of the arch rivals where everyone treats him like a major threat? Like, what? During chapter 9, Shardio has an event where he tries to coerce what I presume would be the heroine you didn't select in chapter 4 into joining his team. Which I thought, oh, this is why you made me select one of the heroines. Maybe he'll use dark magic to mind control her. But nope, he just calls her a stubborn idiot who should join him. And Lavilliere rightfully questions why Shardio thinks insulting her would make her want to join his team. Isn't Shardio supposed to be really smart? Why in the blue heavens would he ever think that one of the 2 people most dedicated to El Ballad would switch sides for absolutely no reason? I don't even know why this scene was in the game, it was so stupid. After you beat both him and Zelgane, you go to the Divine Enforcer to accept the ritual to be the next one, where out of nowhere, surprise, Mystoria gets mind-controlled and kills the Divine Enforcer. Okay. Oh, and the mentor she overly admires? Yeah, she killed her too the same way. Which, by the way, we haven't talked about her since the intro of the game. General Pause pops in to drop these 2 bombshells out of absolutely nowhere, and then just vanishes. Did he just come by to drop these 2 plot points and then leave? The evil god sealed away comes back, and there's this one part right when the god appears where it seems like El Ballad is gonna rally everybody, and then this happens. I want you to know I did not skip or cut anything there. That's how they showed that sequence of events. I could not stop laughing when I saw this. Like, what? Did they just cut to black and then bam, we lost? It's such a mood whiplash that they had to know this was stupidly funny. Afterwards, El Ballad and everyone goes to play a giant ensemble, gets their spirit up, and goes to fight this evil god. Oh, by the way, Mystoria faces the biggest conflict of her entire life, where she finds out she's just killed both her mother and the Divine Enforcer, dooming everybody, and then she just gets over it within a 2-minute conversation that happens about 10 minutes later. It's not surprising seeing the rest of the game, but still. Another problem to note is that both we as the player and El Ballad himself have found out literally nothing about this evil god, aside from the fact that he exists and he's bad. So it's very anticlimactic when he shows up as the final boss. General Palsy and her right-hand woman, Firma, appear for one battle and then go out like complete chumps. There's a flashback sequence right before the final battle starts, where every single scene shown took place during the last 3 chapters, which just highlights how absolutely nothing happened this entire game. It's such a mess, it feels as if they should have set up these bad guys a little more. Have General Palsy and Firma show up instead of Hao and Rin, who do absolutely nothing. Go more into depth on this evil god, do anything. In the end, they just toss a random bad guy at you and go, here's your final boss. Go beat him up. Give a chance for Shardio to show up earlier and talk about his philosophy. They'll just dump it all in a huge mess near the very end to make him seem super whiny. Or even just learn about who the Divine Enforcer is as a person himself. Anyways, I think I've shown enough so that you understand where I'm coming from when I say nothing in Kamino Rhapsody is given the appropriate amount of setup. It's like they were trying to speedrun every meeting, conflict, and resolution as fast as humanly possible. Kamino Rhapsody has solid gameplay, a good amount of character interaction, even if the first meeting is kinda forced, and an absolute mess of a story that clearly forgot it existed until near the very end. If you enjoyed this look at Kamino Rhapsody, like, subscribe, notification, and all buttons are there as always. I already said everything I wanted to earlier, so that'll be it for me this time. If you want to look into playing maybe a different Eushully game, I did a video explaining Sokoku no Aterio, which I'll link on top right here, which has a better story, and an even more unique card gameplay style. Here's something else I've done, and otherwise, with that, I'll see you next time.